Hey everyone, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. Adam here. Today we are dealing with our Moho probes. They are in the process of departing the system here. So I'm just making sure we got all our ducks in a row in terms of communication arrays stuff here and so forth. And here I'm just adding some maneuver nodes so that I can make better adjustments to the actual encounter that I'm going to get with Moho. There's a tendency in this game when you switch sphere of influence that sometimes what it predicts does not come true. So we are having to do a course correction due to that fact. While we're out here, I don't really think there's much we can get in terms of science because I already got all the science. I don't have any new instruments yet. So I don't think there's really much we can do from getting stuff from the sun. So at this point, I'm just warping this ship, the second Moho vessel, out of the sphere of influence here. You can see how the signals are being relayed between those two ships. So I'm setting up just I'm not really making a maneuver, I'm just making basically a place to put a maneuver at a later time. And so I have something on my alarm clock here, pretty much is the idea there. Alright, so at this point we've switched back over to our vessels around Eve. I made a maneuver here just to pull our periapsis up out of the atmosphere. This is on a degrading orbit at this point. Now I could probably use a pass or two through the atmosphere to lower the orbit, but I'm not real sure what orbit I want to put this in yet, so I'm just going to do the teensy tiny burn way out here where it's going to just cost me, it looks like 6.6 meters per second of delta V to get this maneuver done. Now I could probably do this maneuver after an orbit or two. I'm not real sure how much my orbit would degrade from going through the atmosphere once or twice here, and it would save me a lot of fuel, I'm sure, over trying to alter this orbit any other way. It looks like my periapsis is actually inside of the planet, so that probably wouldn't have worked anyway. So we'll go ahead and get the periapsis up to some sort of safe level here if the maneuver is going to execute. This was done in post commentary. Yeah, there it goes. So, as you can see, that 6 meters got us up to, looks like 225, about 226 kilometers. So, that's a pretty cheap way. If I do decide at some point to lower this again, it would be easy to do. I did not end up doing that. At this point, we can probably switch back over to the other vessel here real quick. And we have some maneuvering to do with this as well. And it did the zoom out a billion mile thing again, which I am always a big fan of because I've gotten to the point where I'm paranoid enough that I basically always think that my ship has exploded or some sort of horrible glitch, like the one where you go back to the space center and it's just gone. You know, that happens to me fairly often. I keep automatic backups of my saves, so it's not a big deal. When it does happen, I can just revert back to an earlier save, but it is still a pain in the butt. So at this point, I'm in a little bit of a dilemma because I'm trying to decide what to do. One of these is intended for Gilly, one of these is intended for Eve, so I'm trying to give some thought to what I need to do in order to conserve my fuel so I'd still be able to transfer to Gilly with the main craft, because neither one of these smaller craft is going to have what it takes to do that transfer. There is the time delay, which I still hadn't discovered that I could just fast forward and it would negate the time warp pretty much. The game would continue to send the order to the probe, and then it would just come out of time warp. I didn't realize that yet, but I'm ordering this antenna out so that we can decouple this thing at this point. So just a little bit of waiting here. Alright, so at this point the decoupling is underway here. I've given orders to deploy the solar panels and whatnot as well. Basically, we're good to go with this one. So this is going to end up being the Eve ship, I've decided at this point, since I still have the other probe attached to the main vessel. So we need to go ahead and deploy our relays. I have kind of an idea of what I'm doing with this, but not really. I hadn't really planned through everything here very well, so the dishes get a little bit tricky to deal with, but it ends up working out in the end. So just kind of waiting for everything to activate here. I've run into a strange bug that seems to be pretty consistently happening, where I will switch between two craft. Like I'll decouple one from a main craft, and remote tech will not recognize once they get out of physics range that the other ship still exists. It's easily fixed by just going back to the space center and coming back, but once these drift 2.5 kilometers away or whatever, they will disconnect and it won't work right. So I keep having to decouple, go back to the space center, come back, and then do my stuff. It's kind of annoying. Hopefully that will get addressed in a future bug fix for remote tech. So at this point I'm trying to work out the best way to change my inclination. We're already in a pretty inclined orbit here, but I'm trying to work out what the cheapest way to get into close to polar orbit is going to be. There's not really a good way to do it, unfortunately. It's pretty expensive either way. I only have about 2.1, almost 2.2 K delta V on this thing, and it's going to cost almost, a little more than a third of that just to get this done. It's almost half. So it's kind of a bummer, but it is kind of important that I'm in the right orbit with these, because they're going to be mapping the surface, and it needs to basically pass over the entire surface of the planet to do that. So at this point I'm creating and executing that maneuver. It's going to cost 877 meters per second of delta V to get this done, but we do need to get that correction done. So long to the main craft here. I think that bug is going to end up coming up here. I don't remember if it came up quite yet, or if that's something that comes up later. I guess we'll find out together. So I'm doing this plane change here. The little tiny engine there actually is decently efficient, and it definitely gets the business done here. So it looks like it's going to take a little while to get this burn done, about 10 minutes. So we've come up here, you see on the 2.5 kilometers, and the probe is out of control. So it did indeed happen this time. So I kind of already knew that this was going to happen because I'd experienced it a couple times. So just go back to the space center, wait 700 years while that loads, then go back to the probe, and the connection will have fixed itself by then. It's just some weird physics range kind of issue with remote tech. And I'm playing now currently in some stuff that hasn't been uploaded yet, that I haven't done commentary for yet. What is it, 2.23.5, the asteroid retrieval mission update, and it still happens. I know remote tech isn't supposed to be updated until 0.24. The guy who makes it, I guess, is he's busy. He's got life. Everybody has that, hopefully, and so he isn't able to really do that. He or she, I should say. I don't know. It's a guy. So anyway, it's all fixed now. Not a huge deal. Just wait for this to do its thing. So at this point, I'm relatively happy with my inclination. It's 81, almost 82 degrees. I do want to fix it a little bit further in the future, but I kind of missed my burn point, partially due to the issues I was having with the communications back there. So I'm not going to finish fixing that at this time. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and circularize the orbit so that this thing's locked in. Communications are going to end up, as I find out later in this, going to end up being a little bit of an issue, because this only has like a 5 or a 9 kilometer range. I forget what this omnidirectional antenna has, but it's not that much of a range, but it's good enough to get this done. Alright, so at this point we have decoupled the other ship. I used the remaining fuel that I had in the main probe body that brought this out here to match planes with Gilly. So this is going to be the observer that goes out to actually focus on Gilly. Now, again, we zoomed way out, and I'm starting to have my communications issues. As you can see here, out of range, couldn't finish the whole burn. So what I'm doing is just time warping around until hopefully something comes into range again. There we go. So this is a game we end up having to play quite a bit out here. In the future, I'm going to think these things through a little bit better. I should have seen it coming, I guess, but I didn't. So I didn't end up finishing up that circularization burn of the original Eve probe. It's kind of complicated trying to get this remote stuff set up out here, I think, and have full range all the time. There's really not a good way that I can think of to always be in contact with Kerbal when you're first setting up this stuff. Probably in the future I will send out relay probes as part of this first. So at this point we're taking the Gilly probe, and I am actually increasing its orbit. I'm just circularizing the orbit out here at 27 million meters. thereabouts, because we're going to be doing a plane change to finish matching Gilly's orbit. The other vessel, the main craft that brought this out here, ran out of fuel before I could finish matching planes. So I'm going to use the smaller engine on this to finish the plane change maneuver. As you can see here, we're close, but not, well, we're not really that close, but it's better than it was. So we have more work to do on that. So I'm going to work on setting up that maneuver here. And it takes about 526 meters to do that. It looks like I can do it for, it really doesn't matter if I'm at the ascending or descending node, so I'm just going to do whichever one's the fastest one. Whichever one comes up closest. Go ahead and execute this bad boy at, I guess, the descending node. That will probably work. Alright, so we're executing that maneuver. It's going to take a little bit. Can't even see Gilly at the moment. So at this point we're just wrapping up the burn here. Get our planes all nice and aligned. Then we can start working on figuring out when and where we can get an encounter with Gilly. Gilly is really small, of course, so it's a little bit challenging to get an encounter. The eccentric nature of its orbit is a little bit difficult too, but we'll work it out. It won't be a problem. Alright, so at this point we are coming up to the encounter, and there is a problem here in that we have no communications with any of these satellites. The eccentric nature of Gilly's orbit has flung us out basically way too far away from any of our probes that are orbiting around Eve. So we're just going to end up having a little flyby here, and we'll have to make some adjustments further on to try to get this another encounter. So that's kind of unfortunate. It wasn't a huge burn, and it did, give us a flyby, I guess. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the flyby here. See what we actually get out of this. We're going at a decent clip. It's going to be a pretty darn short encounter, as you can see here, but it actually looks like it shifted my orbit sort of in a favorable way, I think. So it kind of puts me in a tighter orbit around Eve. So I'm kind of happy about that. I don't know how much Gilly actually affected it, but I've never even seen Gilly personally, so I'm kind of excited to get this flyby actually. Trying to spot it right now. And I don't know if it's up or down or left or right. There it is. And yeah, it's just a pretty big asteroid, really. But I am happy to see it for the very first time here. And we'll just pass on by, I suppose, because there's not much I can do about it at this time. So we're back in communications range now. This is still the Gilly probe that I'm working with here. I've got a maneuver that's got us a new encounter, and this encounter is better because it keeps us close to Eve when we actually get it. What I mean to say is when we actually get it. That way we'll have contact with at least one of those satellites around Eve, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue to actually get the burn done. So we're just going ahead and take care of this burn. Then hopefully we'll get the encounter and actually get into orbit finally. All right, so here we go, coming up on the encounter, and as you can see, fortuitously there's a one of the main probes is right above me, so one of those long-range you almost went past the encounter. One of those long-range communication dishes is right above us, so we'll have no problem getting this orbit achieved. After that, we can make adjustments and whatever. It really doesn't matter, just as long as we actually get into orbit here, and we're in the process of doing that. It's not too bad of a burn. We're going to have a decent amount of fuel left, so I'll be able to do plane changes. I think it should be pretty easy to do maneuvers around Gilly since it's so small. It's probably almost, whoa, there you are. It's probably not going to take too much to do inclination changes and stuff. But that is, it's a small little thing, but it's right in my face there. Let's get some visual observations done here. We might as well collect some science. Of course, the signal delay is still going on, so takes a little while for the actual probe to capture that, so skip ahead. We'll see how much science we actually get out of that. So we're finishing up this burn. We still haven't gotten the information on how much science I actually got. The signal hasn't reached yet, but we're only 15 meters per second in orbit here. It is ridiculously slow, so it's not going to be a problem to do whatever I want. I still have 623 meters per second of delta V left, so I could do whatever kind of maneuvers I want to do at this point, and it should not be a problem. Gilly is definitely small. It looks like we get 80 science out of that. So Gilly is definitely small. Mining here, like I had kind of thought about using Gilly as a place to mine Kethane for any missions out here, but I kind of thinking it might be really hard to do just because of the low gravity down there. I don't know how well mining is going to work, but we'll be sending out an actual lander probe here too, so we'll get an idea in a little bit, I guess, how that's going to work out. So at this point, I'm trying to figure out what I have to do to get low space over Gilly. I'm currently at 22,000 meters, which is pretty darn low. But I'm going to try to get that down to 10 kilometers and see if that counts as being low. The really unfortunate thing about Gilly turns out to be that not only are you moving really slow when you're in orbit of it, but time warp gets kind of useless out here because it will only let you time warp up to, like, you know, here we go, we're going 50 times. But as we get closer to the surface, 50 times at this speed is still slow. But as we, oh, I guess it'll let me go higher, but really the problem ended up coming in when I would get low. The heights are just ridiculous for trying to deal with time warp and do anything in a timely fashion here, so it's pretty annoying. At this point, I was still closing in on the low point of the orbit. It's really going to be edited down because this is taking forever, but I've actually found Gilly to be kind of disorienting because we're actually losing altitude above it, but due to the random, you know, non-round nature of its surface, I felt like I was actually getting higher as we were here. This all took forever though, so Gilly's weird. It's very weird. So largely due to boredom, I decided to switch back over to this ship because I was kind of done with Gilly for the time being. Gilly is a boring place of slowness. So what I decided to do is switch back over to one of our Eve probes. You can kind of see the surface. I like the cloud effect a lot. That's pretty cool. You can kind of see the surface breaking through there, but you really can't see. Switch back over here, figure out some more Eve stuff to do, because Eve is far more interesting than Gilly, it turns out. Okay, so at this point we're deploying one of the satellites. This is the one that's going to be remaining here in orbit of Eve. It's going to act as a relay satellite, and it's also got all the ScanSat stuff on it, so it's going to map the planet. But why I wanted to deploy this first is so that we could maintain communications, hopefully better at least, maintain communications with the actual lander that's going to be going down there, because I am concerned about losing communications. We don't have a lot of good infrastructure out here for remote tech, so it is a little bit challenging to keep everything in line here. Now I'm using ion engines, which if I had to do over again, I would not have used ion engines, even though we have like almost 4,000 meters per second of delta V. The ion engines were really annoying. I guess they're a lot better now in 0.2, 3.5. They've like quadrupled the thrust from them, so they're probably a lot more manageable than they were back here. Now, the very first thing I need to do is get my inclination lined up. This does need to be close to 90 degrees. I never put them in exactly 90 degrees except around Gilly so far, just because on most planets it's close enough that the beam width will work out, but with Gilly I want to put them basically at 90 degrees so that because it's so small the beam width probably won't work out as well, but in my experience about 87 is fine for pretty much everything. Now I should have also probably put more solar panels on this thing, considering that it's electrically powered, and it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to keep enough power going to it the whole time, but we make do. So I'm just relabeling it so I actually know what it is. Alright, so at this point we finished the maneuvers with the satellite so that it's in enough of an orbit that we can, I guess, singles hopefully relayed down to this. Now, this is the lander that we're going to be utilizing. It also uses an ion engine, which I would not have done again, considering that it gives us almost 88.6 kilometers per second of delta V, and all it has to really do is alter its orbit so that it enters the atmosphere of Eve, because Eve has an atmosphere. The parachute's going to do all the work. There's no reason for it to have so much delta V. But I'm just fixing my staging so that this will all work the way that I have it planned in my head. I didn't worry about the staging in the vehicle assembly building because I knew it was going to be on top of a big rocket, and I don't worry about the final staging until we get out here just to make sure everything turns out right. So what the plan is to create a maneuver. It's going to get us down inside the atmosphere, go around Eve a few times, because I was really worried about how much damage was going to be done by a deadly reentry. So I wanted to go around a few times to make sure that I would do it in a slow and controlled manner rather than actually burning up and exploding. So I'm going to go ahead and get that maneuver going. Everything needs to deploy because of the signal delay, and we need to get out of the physical distance here of the craft anyway. The physics rendering distance here, 2.5 kilometers, so that remote tech will work. Alright, so we're actually doing the burn to get our apoapsis, or rather our periapsis down inside of the atmosphere. For whatever reason, when the engine actually activated, it says it has 2.2 kilometers. So that's more realistic. It's still way more than what I need, so I need like 40 to do this, so whatever. In the future, I probably will design these things differently. But there goes our parent spacecraft off in the distance. Alright, so we are trucking along here, getting down to a relatively low altitude over the surface here, so that I still have enough time because of the signal delay. I want to make sure that I have enough time to tuck in the solar panels and whatnot so they don't get ripped off once we actually get into the atmosphere here. Now, I am expecting to lose contact with the probe while it's down there, just due to the fact that I'm going to be tucking away the longer range antenna here, and also the comms range. I mean, the comms stuff is just kind of not great. We don't have great coverage down there, so at this point, pretty much just getting this thing into its little crash position so that it's good to go. We can ditch the engine now. I don't know if I do ditch the engine now. I don't remember when I actually do that, but the engine basically has done its job. Am I changing things? What am I? I'm changing. I guess I'm changing things. So we're gonna do another burn, I guess, before we actually ditch the engine here. At this point, that's a pretty decent burn. I don't know what I was thinking with the solar panels being retracted. What am I doing? Alright, so the burn is actually being executed here. Now, pretty much I'm just trying to lower this, get a little bit of the speed burned off, I guess, before we ditch this engine. It's kind of a risky thing. I don't know why I did it this way now that I'm watching this, because when the solar panels retract, I'm going to lose, obviously, solar power, and there's a good danger of burning up more battery than I want to. So cut that as soon as the panels get out there. So now we're going to ditch the engine. I really didn't do a lot of good. I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing that at the time. If I was using a chemical engine, then sure, that would have made sense to do, but not like that. So I'm just cutting the engine loose here. Hopefully it'll burn up in the atmosphere. For whatever reason, it actually didn't, so I ended up deleting it in the tracking station because it was showing up as being a probe. Even though I don't think it has an antenna or anything on it, it was still showing no computer core. It was still showing up as being a probe, so I ended up having to delete it that way because if you're out of physics range, unless it's at a certain altitude, it won't actually model the degrading orbit. So the orbit didn't decay on this, so I just deleted it myself. Now, this guy's in his little, like, tuck and roll position here, pretty much is the idea. And we're going to be contacting the atmosphere in a moment here. We're at 98 kilometers, so I think, it saw a little something start there. Looks like it started about 95 or so. Now, we're starting, that atmosphere really, it slows you down. We're already losing speed pretty rapidly. We're not losing speed. Our orbital speed is actually going up still, but we're losing total energy in the orbit. Our apoapsis is going down at a pretty rapid rate there. Now, we're going to end up making more than one trip through this atmosphere. I don't remember exactly how many it ended up being, but the general idea behind this was that I was not confident in my design as far as the heat shield. I mean, I knew the heat shield would work, but I just wanted to make sure that nothing burned up that was important on this thing. It was starting to see the re-entry effects going on right now. I really do love the re-entry effects, especially with deadly re-entry, because it just makes it a lot more exciting. So I'm kind of just hoping and praying, basically, at this point. I know that 70 kilometers, or 69 I guess I'm at, is not going to be enough to actually burn me up. So I was feeling pretty good about that. We're going almost 4.5 kilometers per second when we actually hit the atmosphere. So it's pretty darn speedy, and we're losing a lot of speed now. It's pretty impressive what Eve's atmosphere will do. but we've already started ascending back out of the atmosphere, so we're going to come around at least one more time here, and we'll be back with that time. Alright, so we've gone through probably about 5 or 6 times now, and it's pretty clear that we're not going to be coming back out this time around. Our apoapsis is only 232 kilometers, so our periapsis is down to 60 now. So that's well to the point where we are going to certainly be re-entering. My parachute's armed. I tweaked the altitude that it's actually going to pop so that I have a little bit better control over this descent, because it's not going to be, there's not going to be any control over this thing. The longer range antenna is tucked in, and the satellite's not going to be back overhead for a while. So this is basically a dummy probe coming in at this point. It will hopefully be able to orient itself correctly and all that stuff with the parachute. So we're really just hoping and praying at this point. Now, as we're coming in real low over the surface here, we can kind of get an idea of some of the surface features. We're going to be going to the dark side of the planet, I think, where we're going to be landing. But we can kind of get an idea that we're headed out over land, so hopefully we'll drop quickly enough that we'll stay over the land. And, you know, this is not designed to be an oceanic probe. Now, aerodynamic forces at this point are whipping the heat shield around to the correct side, so that's good. And at this point, like I said, there's nothing I can do. I ejected the engine a long time ago. There is no control currently over this thing. I deployed one of the solar panels. I'm actually leaving that out sort of as a sacrificial solar panel, I guess, at this point. Like I said earlier, these solar panels do not seem to destruct under any sort of atmospheric conditions. I really probably should have put some of the static solar panels on, you know, the ones that just attach to the hull and don't move, so that it would have been able to, even if, you know, we go through a whole Evian, I guess it'd be Evian, even if we go through a whole night on Eve, hopefully we would be able to have at least some power, so we'd be able to get communications active again. I'm tweaking my parachute right now, trying to get it at, like, I don't know what level I was going for, but basically I just wanted to make sure that there was a good amount of atmospheric air pressure, because on Eve, that if there's one thing you have, it's air pressure. So I wanted to make sure that the parachute didn't deploy at some ridiculously high altitude. Alright, so the camera shifted, which means that something's going on. Look at that atmosphere looking all spooky and purple and weird. I dig Eve. Eve is cool, even though in real life, if it were anything like Venus, this probe would probably just melt on the surface, because it's actually hot enough to melt metal on the surface of Venus, and I assume Eve is somewhat similar, but, you know, who knows. So at this point, we are definitely going down. Our apoapsis is down well inside the atmosphere, and our periapsis is in the center of the planet now. So this is a landing one. Now the parachute's all pre-deployed and all good to go. This took probably a total of 6 trips around before the orbit decayed enough that we actually landed. The atmosphere on Eve is very thick, but at the altitude that I was at, we were going really, really fast still. You can see there we're still going 3 kilometers per second almost. We're going 4.5 at the height of this, so we burned off 1.5 kilometers. Now, I was pretty concerned about what was going to happen with this solar panel. That's why I was kind of watching it here. I was less concerned that it was going to get ripped off, because I'm pretty sure these ones just do not get ripped off by the aerodynamic drag. I was more worried that it was going to burn off, but for whatever reason, the temperature never really spiked up that much. I found that rocking ships back and forth really helps with this. I actually do that intentionally a lot of the time now. I've kind of come to learn that if you just kind of rock them back and forth, it will give it enough time to cool off before it kind of rocks back the other way, and it helps you if you have stuff sticking outside of the protected area behind the heat shield. It will help you to make sure that that stuff does not get burned off. Pretty much, I can't take any readings right now, which is unfortunate, because I would have liked to get some readings from the upper atmosphere on Eve, but I have no satellite communication, so that's going to have to all wait for future expeditions out here. Now, I can't see at all what we're over. Really can't tell if we're over land or not. There's no lights on this thing, which is probably good, because even if I turned them on, I wouldn't have been able to turn them back off. So you know, that probably would have been an issue. I like the green effect over there on the edge of the atmosphere. That looks really cool. So it's pretty much in the hands of aerodynamics now. Look how fast we are slowing down here. We're still up at almost 30 kilometers, and we are just getting our butts kicked by this atmosphere. Now the parachute is in its little drogue mode now, so that's going to slow us down even further, and it is a long ride back down to the surface here. So I would probably just cut ahead until we get down there. Alright, so we're about 2.5 kilometers up still. Now fortunately we did come down right over some land, which is really lucky because, like I said, I was just, you know, in a decaying orbit. I had no control over where we were going to actually be coming down, so I was really pleased about that. It's a relatively flat area too, near a beach. Eve is pretty light even here. This is, I think, technically nighttime here, but it is pretty bright. Look at those clouds whipping around and stuff too. I kind of hesitate to. I thought things were gonna fall off. I kind of hesitate to send a manned vehicle here because it just looks so inhospitable. And if, like I said, if it is anything like Venus, then you would just die anyway if you were here. So I tried to send a command. I don't know why I did that, because clearly it says no connection up there in the top corner. But with this parachute, we're still at 900 meters here, and we are falling at 3.5 meters per second. So due to the thicker atmosphere, parachutes are ludicrously effective here. So that's a good thing. That, you know, there's a definite trade-off you get with Eve. It takes an awful lot of Delta V to take off again. So if we do send a manned mission, I'm gonna have to design a very like super special lander. But you get a pretty good trade-off in that you get free landings pretty much. So, you know, take it for what you will. It's got its ups, it's got its downs, but basically the idea here is to touch this thing down safely on the surface, and then when the sun comes back around, when Eve rotates back towards the sun, we'll be able to deploy the rest of the stuff and get some readings here. So this is going to take forever. We'll skip ahead again here until actual touchdown. Alright, so here it comes. Boom! Now the gravity is also a lot higher here, so you can see things kind of get funky and warped, but that's just the higher gravity. So we made it to land. I'm happy about that. Alright, so we have our comm signal back. It's not quite daytime yet, but I'm just checking our power situation. It seems okay. I ordered a bunch of stuff, various experiments. Looks like we're going to get a decent amount of stuff back. Definitely transmit some of this stuff. Unfortunately, there's no way to return anything, so we just got to kind of make do with what we got here. Might as well deploy the gear as well to get this thing out, ready to go. And so pretty much just gathering science here. We'll see what comes of it. So the landing legs decided to pop back up. They're still kind of, we'll just assume the sand is really thin or something, I don't know. Not really getting any science back from any of these instruments anymore, but we are getting solar power from somewhere, so that's cool. And got all our little antennas out. We're good to go. So I guess this guy will just live down here on the surface for now. This might be a spot to do a landing if I ever do, just because I know that there's a relatively flat space here, so we'll have to think about that. And with that, I think that's going to pretty much wrap this up. We have some stuff to deal with stuff arriving at Moho next time, so thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.